What's going on, everybody? Nick Willard, Almost Canon podcast. So, this is a promo for our newest episode this week on mysterious New England stone structures. Or maybe not necessarily mysterious stone structures, but I'm talking, well, let's get into the history here. A real quick history. So, the official story behind why New England is covered in stone walls all comes down to sheep, right? Not something everybody knows. So it all starts way back when, after Napoleon Bonaparte invades Spain. You see, Spain had a lucrative monopoly on wool, but because of Napoleon's army and the fighting that ensued, when he invaded, they were forced to let go of that stranglehold they held on the wool market, and the sheep, obviously, that produced that wool. This is when a U.S. ambassador to Portugal, a dude by the name of William Jarvis. Now, many people around here might actually know who we're talking about. Obviously, not that guy, because we're talking 1800s here, but they most likely know members of his family because this guy was from Wethersfield, Vermont, and he started buying up sheep and sending them back to his homestead in Wethersfield. Now, according to Tom Wessel, who wrote Reading the Forested Landscape, A Natural History of New England, Mr. Jarvis had imported up to 40,000 of these sheep by 1810. And this Tom Wessel guy is also involved in another topic I've been looking into for months now. And that would be, the stone cairns on the summit or near the summit of Glastonbury Mountain. So, William Jarvis quickly found out some stuff. And so did everybody else. Because by the 1840s, there were 1.7 million sheep in Vermont and 600,000 in New Hampshire. The sheep business was booming, right? Sounds it. Definitely sounds it. This was because the New England landscape was incredibly rocky, right? We all know this. Notoriously bad for crops, growing crops, but good for grazing animals like sheep. So between 1810 and 1840, farmers clear-cut up to 75% of Vermont. Same goes for New Hampshire and portions of Massachusetts and Connecticut to make way for pastures. And when they did this, they would stack up the stones they came across, kind of constructing these stone walls that we see today. And these walls, they make perfect fences as well as property lines. And when the wool boom went bust in the mid-1840s and the sheep were sold off or slaughtered or, whatever they did with them, the 240,000 miles of stone walls remained where they were, right? And eventually the forest grew back up, leaving us with what we see today. And all that seems to track fairly well, right? Until you break the numbers down. And that might sound weird, I'm from New England, from Vermont my entire life. I've seen stone walls every day of my life. I never thought twice about them. So hearing a quote unquote conspiracy about the stone walls is almost laughable, right? Well, once you start looking deeper into these walls, these stone walls, things start getting a little wonky. So I pulled some numbers, some researchers have gone over, and things like they don't seem to add up. So even though we're talking about a 40 to 45 year period, or a 30 to 35 year period, these researchers, from when I say 1810 to 1840, 1845, 35 years, these researchers, they use 1620 as their starting point, when New England started really getting settled. And they went until they used 1872 as their ending point, and 1872 was the first year the Department of Agriculture first looked into these stone walls. So, and they figured that, these researchers, they figured that these farmers, they would have needed to build 4 miles of stone wall per day, or 1/3 of a mile per hour, or 1 foot every 2 seconds for 6 days. 6 days a week. They left off Sunday for rest. 6 days a week for a consistent 250 years in order to build the 240,000 miles of stone wall found across New England. Now, like I said earlier, these walls were supposedly built over a 30 to 35 year period between 1810 and 1840, 1845. Some people say 1840 was when this bust went. Some say, around 1845, somewhere in there. But and it just doesn't make sense, right? And I'm not even going to bring up the 800 documented stone chambers found throughout New England, because that will just throw everything off. Either way, check out Almost Canon's newest episode, coming out today, Friday, the 24th, where we talk with Mike, Mystic Mike, from the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast about these, New England stone structures. And I think you might find that all these stone walls you're so used to looking at might actually be almost canon.